A small, round, pale creature sitting in the corner of a frame. It has 2 stalk eyes, a soft shell, and a body that looks like it was drawn in about 4 seconds. It is not doing anything. It is not part of the scene. The episode is happening somewhere else in the picture, and this little creature is just there, near the edge, raising one tiny limb in a gesture that is unmistakably a wave. It waves at you. That is the entire performance. It has been doing this in the corner of frames, in the background of rooms, on ceilings, inside bags, half submerged in liquid, pressed into the side of a stretching dog for nearly the entire run of this series. Most people who watched Adventure Time as children remember the snail the way you remember a smell from a house you used to live in. You could not tell anyone where exactly it was. You just knew it was there. And what almost nobody who watched the show casually ever found out is that this small, generically snail-looking creature, this throwaway in-joke between an animation crew, is the mechanism through which the most powerful and most terrifying villain in the entire series escapes the prison he has been sealed inside. That is the kind of thing this video is about. Not the snail alone, the pattern the snail belongs to. Adventure Time is a show that hid things on purpose, all the way through, for 10 seasons and 4 specials and a spin-off. And the things it hid were not decoration. They were story. A photograph on a bedroom wall that does not get explained for 3 more years. A line of real chemistry on a chalkboard nobody was going to read. A dip in a background population chart that corresponds to the Black Death. A nuclear bomb sitting on a bookshelf in a tree fort between what looks like some books and a jar of something, with nobody in the scene reacting to it. The show planted these things small, paid them off large, and never once stopped the story to point at what it had done. This video is 150 of them, give or take, told the way the show built them, which is to say slowly, by accumulation, with the weight arriving long after the seed was planted. Welcome to Tome. Get comfortable, because this one is going to take a while, and the whole point is that it should be comfortable to drift in and out of rather than something that demands your full attention. If you fall asleep somewhere in the middle, that is genuinely fine. There is no payoff waiting at the end that you will miss. Each section stands on its own. Let us get into it. The most famous hidden detail in Adventure Time is also the simplest one, and it makes sense to start there, because everything else this video does is a more complicated version of it. There is a snail. It is what the Adventure Time wiki, with admirable seriousness, calls a mollusk person, and it is hidden in nearly every single episode of the main series. Pendleton Ward, the show's creator, set this up early on as a challenge for the animation team. Hide this snail somewhere in every episode, in a spot where viewers can find it if they are looking for it. Sometimes it is tucked into the corner of a background, barely visible, the kind of thing you would only catch on a second viewing. Sometimes it is right there in the foreground and you somehow miss it anyway because your eye is on the characters. The spots vary enormously, and that variation is a large part of why looking for it became such a satisfying thing to do. The snail does not have a personality in most of its appearances. It does not have lines. It stands there and waves. That is the bit. That is all the bit is, for a long time. There are a handful of episodes where it does not appear, or where its appearance is more conceptual than literal, and the list itself tells you something about how the crew thought about it. The pilot does not have it. The original short, the 7-minute one, predates the snail entirely, so the snail simply does not exist yet when that was made. The episode Food Chain does not have it. Food Chain was written and directed by Masaki Yuasa, the Japanese animation director, and it is visually unlike anything else in the series because it was not animated by the usual team, which is presumably why the snail is not in it. The episode Obsidian, one of the Distant Lands specials, does not have it. The episode The Wand does not have it. The Frog season shorts skip it, but across the main series, episode after episode after episode, there it is, with a consistency that the animation team clearly took some quiet pride in maintaining. There is at least one episode, Evicted, where the snail appears twice, which apparently happened once and never again. Here is the thing about the snail that lifts it out of the category of running gag and into the category of actual plot detail. There is a moment in season 2, in the episode Mortal Folly, which is the season 2 finale, where the snail does its little wave the way it always does, and then the Lich possesses it. Just like that. The Lich is the show's most powerful villain, an ancient force whose entire purpose is the end of all life, and at this point in the story, he has been sealed inside a prison of amber. He needs a way out, and the way out is the snail. The snail climbs out of Finn's backpack, which is a detail that rewards knowing where the snail tends to hide, and because it is not wearing the protective gem jewelry that shields against the Lich's influence, it gets possessed. The possessed snail then smashes the amber from the inside, and the Lich is loose. The possessed snail, by the way, is voiced by Pendleton Ward, the same person who invented the challenge in the first place, which is a small extra layer if you care about that kind of thing. Think about what that actually means in terms of how the show is built. For an entire season and into the next, the audience has been trained, gently, almost without noticing, to track this small creature. Every time you found the snail and watched it wave, the show was teaching you to look for it, building a familiarity. And then it took that familiarity and used it as a delivery mechanism for something genuinely unsettling. The cheerful little background character you had been hunting in episodes becomes the vessel for an apocalyptic evil. And it works as a payoff precisely because of all the attention you had already been paying. This is not a coincidence the writers stumbled into. This is the show recognizing that it had planted something and finding a way to use it that earned every second viewers had spent on it. There is a specific kind of good writing where you set up something small without knowing exactly what it will become, and then you find a way to use it that justifies the setup. The snail is the cleanest example of it in the series. There is a detail I particularly like, which is that the possession does not end with mortal folly. It continues into the next episode, Mortal Recoil, and the snail's appearances in that episode have a subtly different energy to them. It is still just standing there, it is still in the background, but once you know what has happened to it, it reads completely differently, and the crew leaned into that, hiding it in those episodes in a way that fits the changed circumstances. The show does not comment on this. It does not add music to tell you the snail is sinister now. It just changes where the snail is, and trusts that the viewers who are paying attention will feel the difference. One of the more interesting appearances comes much later, in the episode Simon and Marcy, which is set roughly 1,000 years before the main series, showing Simon Petrikov and a young Marceline surviving together after the Mushroom War. The snail appears in that episode too, which raises a quiet question the show never answers. How long has this creature been alive? Is it the same snail? Possibly it is a different one entirely, and the cameos are a recurring type rather than a single individual, the way you might draw the same kind of bird in every forest scene. Possibly it is the same snail, and it is as old as the land itself, which would make it one of the oldest things in the entire setting, older than most of the kingdoms. The Adventure Time Encyclopedia, an in-universe reference book, has Marceline list the snail as a resident of the grasslands, which tells you almost nothing about how long it has lived, but does confirm that it is considered a real character within the world. Not just a visual gag the crew agreed to keep doing. The show leaves the question open. That is a choice. A show that explained the snail would be a different show. There is a moment in the Distant Lands special BMO, the one set before the main series, where the snail does not appear. And that absence is itself a kind of appearance, because of what is there instead. The snail itself is missing from that special, but its shell shows up in the background, drifting, without the snail inside it, which reads as a deliberate nod from the crew, a way of saying they did not forget the snail, they just sent it away for a while, the shell standing in for the creature, the way an empty house stands in for the people who live there. The shell without the snail is its own Easter egg, an Easter egg about the absence of an Easter egg, which is exactly the kind of thing this show would do. And exactly the kind of thing it would do without comment in the background for the handful of viewers who had been tracking the snail closely enough to notice that the snail was gone and the shell was not. That is the level the crew was operating at, all the way to the spin-offs and the specials. The snail had become a thing they thought about even when they were not putting it in. The corner had become a place with a history, and the show kept tending it, episode after episode, special after special, because tending the corners was simply what these people did. And the doing of it is the entire reason the show still rewards the kind of attention this video is built out of. Then there is the matter of how inventive the hiding got. One of the placements fans have tracked with particular affection is from the episode City of Thieves, where the snail appears not as a visible creature tucked into a background corner, but as an imprint, the outline of its body pressed into Jake's stomach during a moment where Jake's stretchy form is compressed. The show uses Jake's physique as a canvas. That is lateral thinking from whoever was placing the snail that week, and it is the kind of thing that only happens when the people doing the work have decided, collectively, that a 5-year-old in-joke deserves to be done well. There's also a tradition of putting the snail in spots so improbable that the placement itself becomes the joke. On a ceiling, inside a bag, half submerged in liquid. The challenge Ward gave the animation team was not really conceal the snail effectively, it was hide the snail in a way that is funny. And across the show's entire run, looked at as a single body of work, the results are genuinely impressive. Someone made sure this small creature appeared in hundreds of episodes, found increasingly creative places for it, and kept a straight face the whole time. That is a remarkable level of commitment to a bit, and it is also, in miniature, the entire thesis of this video. The people who made this show cared about the corners. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a man named Simon Petrikov, whose face is on a photograph on a bedroom wall. And if you only ever watched the first season or two of Adventure Time, you would have no idea who he is. Because in those early episodes, the character he becomes is a villain, played almost entirely for laughs, the Ice King. He is irritating and pathetic as much as he is threatening. He is obsessed with kidnapping Princess Bubblegum and forcing her to marry him. He has a beard that lets him fly. Somehow, the show never dwells on the mechanics. His penguins are all named Gunter, every one of them, which is its own small running joke. He is awful in a silly way. And then, gradually, over seasons, the show starts pulling back the curtain on who he was before, and the whole picture of the character reorganizes itself around information you were given long before you understood what it meant. The reveal proper happens in Holly Jolly Secrets, a 2-part Christmas episode. It is season 3, episodes 19 and 20, and it aired on December the 5th, 2011, which is worth stating plainly because the date matters to how the show distributes this kind of information. Finn and Jake break into the Ice King's castle to steal his VHS tapes, expecting to find evil plans, the way you would expect a villain's secret tapes to contain. Instead, they find home videos. A man recording himself. A man documenting his own deterioration so that someone, anyone, would eventually know what had happened to him. His name was Simon Petrikov. Before everything, he was an antiquarian, a specialist in ancient artifacts. He had a professorship. He had dark hair and olive skin and glasses. He had, by every indication, a perfectly ordinary mind of considerable intelligence, and a fiancée named Betty, and a wedding coming. And on an expedition, he bought a strange jeweled crown from a dock worker, and he put it on to make Betty laugh. And that is where it starts. The crown made him black out. He had no memory of what he did while wearing it, but whatever it was frightened Betty enough that she left him, and he never saw her again. He kept wearing it anyway, because the voices in the crown told him things, and because by then his body had changed in ways that meant he needed it. His skin turned blue, his nose changed shape, his hair went white, his body temperature dropped to a permanent 30 degrees below zero, well outside the range a human body survives, and his survived anyway. He recorded all of this. The tapes are him, on camera, watching himself disappear, narrating it for an audience that might not exist. And the episode plays these tapes in the middle of a Christmas episode. There are candy canes, Finn has a Santa hat on, the tone around the tapes is goofy, the way Adventure Time Christmas episodes are goofy, and then the tapes start, and the tone shifts completely, and the show does not warn you that it is about to do that. It just does it. Tom Kenny, who voices the Ice King throughout the series, does something in those moments that deserves to be named. Speaking as Simon, his voice is a different voice, quieter, steadier, genuinely frightened in a way that has nothing in common with the Ice King's comic bluster. It is the same actor and the same character, and the distance between who Simon was and what the Ice King is can be heard in the space between those two registers. We will come back to that voice near the end of this video, because it is, in a sense, the one Easter egg in this show that is not hidden anywhere. It is sitting right out in the open, in the performance, and most people walk past it for years. There is a detail in one of the tapes that is easy to miss on a first watch. Simon references a specific thing he did while wearing the crown that he has no memory of. The show never tells you what it was. Betty left because of it. That gap, that unshown, unspecified thing, does more work than any explicit reveal could, because your imagination fills it with something worse than whatever the writers could have shown. This is the show trusting the absence. It is the same instinct that keeps the snail's lifespan unexplained. The thing left out is doing the heavy lifting. The Simon and Betty story does not end with the tapes. Betty appears later in the series, pulled forward through a time portal, during a moment when Simon is briefly restored to himself, and their reunion is incomplete and painful in very particular ways. She comes back, but so much time has passed, and the show does not let either of them off the hook with an easy resolution. Meanwhile, the episodes exploring Simon's relationship with the young Marceline are their own entire emotional thread, and they connect directly back to the photograph on the bedroom wall, the one you saw in season 2, without knowing what you were looking at. In the aftermath of the Mushroom War, Simon found Marceline as a small child among the ruins of a city, crying, and he gave her a stuffed bear from a destroyed toy shop. And she sewed a button onto the bear's missing eye, using the last bit of thread she had, and she named it Hambo. That bear has been sitting in the corner of Marceline's bedroom since the second season. So has the photograph of the two of them. The show put both of those objects on screen years before it told you why they would break your heart, and it did not do it as a tease. It did it because that is how the world worked. The objects were in the room because the history was real, and the history would get told when the show was ready to tell it. By the series finale, Simon is freed from the crown. He becomes himself again, briefly and completely, and Betty is already gone by then. Having made a choice we will not get into here except to say it was a sacrifice. Simon is free and alone and finally himself, And it is bittersweet in the specific way the best resolutions of long-running emotional storylines tend to be. What Holly Jolly Secret starts, the rest of the show carries forward very carefully. The idea that knowing someone's history changes how you are allowed to see them. After those tapes, Finn does not get to simply dislike the Ice King anymore. He has to hold the comedy and the tragedy together in the same person at the same time, which is harder than either one alone. And the show asks the audience to do the same thing. That is not a small thing to ask of a children's cartoons audience. The show asks it anyway, and it asks it by hiding the answer in plain sight and waiting. The land of Oo is Earth. This is never stated outright in the first few seasons. The show just shows you, and the showing accumulates until the implication becomes impossible to ignore. And then, much later, a character says it out loud, and by that point, the line confirms something rather than revealing it. There is a ruined building in the background of an early episode. The architecture is recognizably modern. There is a fragment of a road. There's a highway sign half buried in moss. The further you get into the series, the more of these details pile up. And somewhere in there, at a different point for every viewer, the thing clicks. A catastrophic event ended human civilization. The world that grew up in its aftermath, the candy kingdoms and the lumpy space and the magic, is what you have been watching. That event is called the Mushroom War. The name alone suggests mushroom clouds, and everything the show provides over its run confirms a nuclear conflict roughly 1,000 years before the present day. The single most quietly remarkable instance of this is a chart. In the episode High Strangeness, which is Season 8, Episode 17, and which aired on January the 25th, 2017, there is a world population chart visible on screen for a moment. If you pause it, you can see the population line behaving the way you would expect a population line to behave across human history, rising and rising, and then plummeting, catastrophically, at the point that corresponds to the Mushroom War. That part you might have guessed was there. The part that is genuinely something is a small dip in that line around the year 1300. That is the Black Death. Somebody on the background art team put the bubonic plague into a throwaway population graph in a cartoon about a boy and his magic dog. Nobody points it out. No character mentions it. It is not framed. It is just there, accurate, for the viewers who freeze the frame. And it is there because somebody who designed that chart thought about actual human history and decided the chart should be right. That is the show's whole relationship with hidden detail in one image. The care exceeds the requirement by an enormous margin, and the excess is never advertised. There are survivor details scattered across the show, and the show is specific about them in a way that rewards assembling them. Simon survived the war because of the crown. BMO's creator survived by gradually replacing his failing biological body with robotic parts over the centuries, keeping his human skin, which implies a period where the environment was bad enough that biological survival required adaptation. A man called Two-Bread Tom led a tribe of humans that survived in isolation. There is a woman named Elise and her half-human, half-demon daughter, who is Marceline, and they survived too, at least for a while. Susan Strong, introduced in Season 2 as a character Finn initially believes might be human, turns out to be exactly that, a descendant of those hidden human tribes, slightly mutated, but fundamentally human. The detail that Finn spends most of the series believing he might be the last human in Oo, and then gradually discovers he is not, is one of those long-running threads the show plants early and pays off quietly, and we will come back to it later when we talk about the islands. For now, the point is narrower. Every one of these survivor stories is information about what the ruins in the background actually are. The show could have had a character explain the Mushroom War in Season 1. It chose not to. It chose to let you arrive at the understanding gradually, some viewers taking seasons, some catching it earlier, some never quite assembling it, and that choice is why the realization, when it comes, feels personal, like something you figured out rather than something you were told. There is something to that approach worth sitting with for a moment. A show that announced in Episode 1 that this was post-apocalyptic Earth would be a different show and a lesser one. You would watch it differently from the start. The post-apocalyptic frame would be a premise rather than a discovery. By holding it back and seeding it through the backgrounds, through the survivor details, through a highway sign in the moss, the show makes the discovery yours. And then it goes further, because once you have made the discovery, the early episodes you already watched change. The goofy fantasy world is still goofy and fantastical, but now it is also a graveyard with grass growing over it. And the show did not change a single frame to make that true. It was always true. You just were not ready to see it. That is the same move as the snail and the same move as Simon's photograph. Plant it small, let it sit, let the weight arrive on its own schedule. And never, at any point, stop the story to make sure you noticed. The Farm World storyline, the two-parter near the start of Season 5, gives you a version of how history could have diverged, and it makes the stakes of the Mushroom War concrete. In that alternate timeline, Simon Petrikov used the Crown's power to stop a specific bomb from detonating during the war. In the main timeline, he did not stop it. The farm world version of Marceline confirms this directly. Simon saved the world from the bomb of death roughly 1,000 years before the present, in the alternate timeline, and the implication is that his failure to stop it in the main timeline is what created the magic of Ooh, the mutating fallout, the strange new creatures, the land transformed into what we watch. And here is the detail that ties it back into everything. In the Farm World episodes, the bomb is frozen in ice. In the main timeline, that same stretch of land would have become the Ice King's kingdom. The ice, in other words, is what is left of Simon's last act of containment. He froze what he could, using the crown, at enormous cost to himself. The Ice Kingdom is not a random location. It is the place where Simon held the end of the world at bay as long as he could, and then could not hold it any longer. And the show lets you work that out from the geography, rather than handing it to you. The thing in the background is the thing that matters. It always was. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a viola, and at one point in season 3, a character snaps it in half. And for the rest of the series, every time that viola appears, it has duct tape on it. That is the whole story. It is also one of the purest examples of the kind of continuity Adventure Time is good at, which is not the sweeping mythological kind, but the small domestic kind. The kind where a prop carries the memory of a scene that would have been completely forgettable if not for this one detail. The episode is What Was Missing, season 3, episode 10, and it aired on September the 26th, 2011. In it, Jake breaks his instrument. It is a viola, not a violin, which is the kind of distinction that Wiki insists on and which is worth getting right. And the breaking happens in the middle of a larger story, not as a major event. It is a beat, a thing that happens. And then from that point on, for the rest of the show, the viola is taped together. It never comes up again. Nobody mentions it. No character looks at the tape and sighs about the time it broke. The instrument just keeps appearing in later episodes, held together with tape, as a quiet acknowledgement that the moment happened and was not undone. Think about the discipline that requires. Somebody on the show's art side had to remember, years later, episode after episode, that this prop has tape on it now. Not because anyone in the audience was going to complain if it did not. The overwhelming majority of viewers never noticed the viola was taped, the same way they never noticed where the snail was hiding. But the show treated the breaking as real, and real things stay broken, or stay mended badly, and so the viola is taped forever, in the background of scenes that have nothing to do with violas. The show does not comment on this. It does not need you to know it is doing it. It does it because the world is supposed to hold together, and a world holds together by remembering its own small injuries. There are quite a few of these scattered across the show, and once you start cataloguing them, you begin to see the texture of the thing. The duct-taped viola is maybe the most consistently tracked one, but it is far from the only example. Finn's body is the other big one, and it works on a larger scale. Finn loses his right arm in the episode Escape from the Citadel, season 6, episode 2, which aired on April the 21st, 2014, as part of a 1-hour event with the episode Wake Up. The arm is ripped off, and the show does not just ignore the wound. A flower grows from the stump. That flower is there in the next episode. It is there in the episode after that. The arm regenerates over time, slowly, across multiple episodes, the grass coming back first, the way grass does, and then the limb. The show tracks this the same way it tracks the taped viola, not by calling attention to it, but by simply making sure it is there. You could watch those episodes and not consciously register that Finn's arm is in a different stage of regrowth in each one. The show is fine with that. It is keeping the continuity for its own sake, not for applause. And the flower, it turns out, is not just a flower. It is connected to the grass sword, which is its own thread, and which we will get to properly in a moment, because the grass sword is one of the most ambitious examples in the entire series of the show, planting something small and paying it off enormous. For now, hold on to the flower. Hold on to the idea that the show, when it injures a character, does not press a reset button. The injury has consequences that play out at the pace injuries play out, and the consequences are in the background of episodes that are about something else, and almost nobody is watching closely enough to see it, and the show does it anyway. That is the pattern. That is the whole video. There are smaller ones too, scattered everywhere, the kind you only catch if you are the sort of person who freezes frames. Princess Bubblegum's lab throughout the series is filled with chalkboards covered in notation. Some of it is real chemistry, actual equations, periodic table elements, structural diagrams that make technical sense if you know what you are looking at. Some of it is invented, but invented in a style consistent with real laboratory work, so that even the made-up parts feel like they belong on a working scientist's board. The show did not need to put real science on those boards. A generic mad scientist scribble would have read the same to the overwhelming majority of the audience. They did it anyway, probably because someone on the team enjoyed doing it, and also because it makes Bubblegum's world feel grounded in actual intellectual activity rather than aesthetic shorthand. The Ice King's browser history is briefly visible in one episode on his computer screen in the background of a scene, and fans have tracked it and compiled it. The show does not pause on it or zoom in. It is just there if you are looking. The Barnacle Chips billboard, a fictional product, appears across multiple separate episodes in different locations, which suggests someone was keeping track of where it had appeared before and making sure the reappearances made geographic sense, so that Ooh has a commercial landscape with continuity to it, off in the corners where the story is not. And there is a face on Finn's backpack. Not a prominent face, not a character with a name, just a face pressed into the green material of the bag, which occasionally reacts very slightly to things. The show treats it as an ambient living object in a world full of ambient living objects, never a plot point, entirely consistent with how the show handles dozens of minor magical details. None of these are load-bearing. All of them are evidence of the same habit. The people who made this show built the parts of it nobody was going to look at with the same care they built the parts everybody would. There is one more I want to mention here, because it sits at the intersection of the small domestic continuity and the big mythological kind, and that is Finn's hat. The white bear hat. He wears it through the entire series. It does not come off. For most of the show, the hat's origin is treated as unimportant, the kind of thing you do not ask about, like why the Ice King's beard works. And then, eventually, the show addresses it in passing, matter-of-factly, in a way that makes you realize they had always known exactly where the hat came from. They just had not chosen to bring it up. The things this show knows and chooses not to say are almost as interesting as the things it says, and the hat is a small monument to that. It was always going to get explained. The explanation was always sitting there. The show was just waiting until the explanation would mean something, and in the meantime, the hat was just a hat on a boy's head, in the background of his own life. There is a sword made of grass, and a boy buys it from a wizard, and the sword curses itself to him so that it can never be taken away. And for a long time, that is all it is. A weapon with a strange property, a thing the boy carries. And then, several seasons later, that sword turns out to have been carrying a piece of the boy the whole time, and the piece becomes a person. And the person becomes one of the boy's defining relationships, and one of the show's quiet tragedies. That is the grass sword. It is, in terms of pure set-up-to-payoff distance, one of the most ambitious things Adventure Time ever attempted, and it is built out of exactly the same instinct as the snail and the viola, just stretched across more screen time and aimed at a heavier target. It starts in the episode Blade of Grass, which is in Season 5, and which originally aired in 2014. Finn buys the grass sword from the grassy wizard. The wizard sells it cheap, which should be a warning, and the catch arrives quickly. The sword curses itself to bond to its owner. It wraps around Finn's arm and it will not come off. For a while, this is played as an inconvenience and then as a feature. The sword as a part of Finn, always available, the way you might think of a prosthetic that grew on. It becomes a continuous visual element. There is a green sword wrapped around Finn's forearm in episode after episode, and you stop noticing it the way you stop noticing the snail, which is exactly the state the show wants you in before it does the thing it is going to do. The thing it does involves the arm. When Finn's arm is ripped off in Escape from the Citadel, the grass sword goes with it. And what happens next plays out over a long stretch of screen time. A flower grows from the stump, as I mentioned. The arm slowly regrows. And separately, away from Finn, the grass sword and a fragment of Finn that got caught up in it, a cracked off piece of the Finn sword, the family sword, merge into something new. That something is Fern. Fern is revealed in the Season 8 premiere, Two Swords, which aired in 2017. And Fern is, in the most literal possible sense, a part of Finn that broke off and grew into its own being. A version of Finn that did not get to be Finn. The show treats this as exactly as painful as it sounds. Fighting Fern is Finn fighting a piece of himself. Hurting Fern is the two of them hurting each other. There is no clean victory available, because the thing you are fighting is you. The part of you that got left behind, and the show knows that, and it does not let either of them off easily, the same way it did not let Simon and Betty off easily. What I want you to sit with is the architecture. The show planted the grass sword in Season 5 as a curiosity. It made you stop noticing it. It kept the flower growing from the wound in the background of episodes about other things. And then in Season 8, it collected all of it. The sword, the curse, the broken family sword, the fragment of Finn, the slow regrowth, and turned it into Fern. And Fern carries the weight of all those seasons of accumulation. If the show had introduced Fern cold in Season 8 with no setup, Fern would be a guest character. Because the show spent 3 seasons quietly building toward it, mostly in details nobody was tracking, Fern arrives already heavy. That is the difference between a prop and a story. A prop is the thing on screen. A story is the thing the prop turns out to have been all along. And Adventure Time understood that the way very few shows aimed at children have ever understood it. There is a related detail worth naming, which is the distinction the show maintains, mostly silently, between Finn's swords. There is the golden sword from the early seasons. There is the family sword, the Finn sword, which has its own complicated history. There is the grass sword. The show does not stop to lecture you on which is which, and it is easy to lose track, and the wiki has had to do real work to keep them straight, but the show itself is consistent. Each sword is its own object with its own arc. The family sword cracking is what gives Fern its non-grass component. The grass sword is the curse and the bond. The golden sword is the early season's workhorse that the show, much later, actually does explain the origin of. Because of course it does. Because nothing in this show is just a prop if you wait long enough. The point is not that you need to keep all of this in your head. The point is that the show kept it all in its head for years and built consequences on it. And most of those consequences happened in the corners while the camera was looking at something else. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a nuclear bomb on a shelf in the tree fort. It is in the background of my scene in the episode Be More, Season 5, Episode 28, which aired on June the 17th, 2013. Finn and Jake are at home. The bomb is on a shelf between what looks like some books and a jar of something, and nobody in the scene looks at it, and nobody mentions it, and the episode moves on. There is something very funny about the idea that Finn and Jake have a nuclear bomb on their bookshelf, and have apparently decided this is fine. And there is something else underneath the funny, which is that this is a world built on top of a nuclear war, and the debris of that war is literally lying around the house as decor, because in a world 1,000 years after the bombs fell, a bomb is just an old object somebody put on a shelf. The show does not make a point of this. It does not have a character pick the bomb up and deliver a monologue about how the past is always with us. It just puts the bomb on the shelf and lets it sit there. And the sitting there is the statement. The tree fort itself is a longer story than the show ever bothers to tell you. And once you know it, the bomb on the shelf becomes one detail in a building that is full of them. The fort where Finn and Jake lived throughout the series, with the bookshelves and the trapdoor in the bedroom, was not theirs first. It was Marceline's. She moved into it with her boyfriend Ash, centuries before Finn was born. When that relationship ended, she moved out, and the fort sat empty for a very long time before 2 boys claimed it. The show establishes this in the episode Evicted, where Marceline shows up and kicks them out, then eventually lets them have it back. And once you have that, the fort changes. It is not a treehouse a couple of kids found. It is a place with a tenant history that goes back centuries. A place where a vampire and her boyfriend lived and broke up. A place that was abandoned and reclaimed. And the kids living in it now are just the current residents. The history of that building goes back much further than the series stops to mention, the same way the snail's lifespan does, the same way Simon's photograph did. The show puts the information where you can find it and then never brings it up again. There is a detail in Be More itself, beyond the bomb, that is worth pausing on, because Be More is the BMO origin episode, and it is dense with this stuff. And we are going to come back to BMO in a full section later, so I will plant this one here, the way the show would. The MO units, the line of robots BMO belongs to, were built at a factory called MO Company, and the inventor who built them, an ancient man who replaced most of his biological body with machinery to survive the centuries, has a desk. And on the desk, glimpsed in passing, are blueprints. Plans. The show shows you the inventor's workspace, and the workspace has things in it that imply a whole life of projects. And one of those things, much later, in a Distant Land special, turns out to matter. But that is for the BMO section. For now, the bomb on the shelf, the fort's hidden history, the inventor's desk. 3 objects in the background of episodes about something else. Each one a door into a larger story the show is content to leave mostly closed. There is a stone duck in the future, and to understand why that matters, you have to know about the 2-headed duck in the past, and to know about that you have to have watched the original title sequence of Adventure Time more times than you can count, which, if you watch the show, you have. The original title sequence is short. Finn and Jake run over a hill. The show's name appears. It is one of the simplest title sequences in Cartoon Network history, and that simplicity is a large part of why it works. It gives you tone and energy in under a dozen seconds and then gets out of the way. But it has details in it. There's a 2-headed duck in the background of the sequence. It is a small, easily missed creature, and it appears in this position so briefly that most viewers simply never registered it, the way they never registered the snail. It is just there, in the corner of the thing you watched at the start of every episode. The reason it becomes interesting is the series finale. Come along with me. The finale, which aired on September the 3rd, 2018, opens with a completely different title sequence, set roughly 1,000 years after the main story. Two new characters, Shermie and Beth, are the new adventurers, and this future sequence is constructed deliberately as a parallel to the original, a pair of heroes running over a landscape, the world implied rather than explained. And in this future sequence there is a duck, but not a small living two-headed one. It is a massive carved stone duck, ancient looking, with someone riding it. That stone duck is the giant duck, which the show first introduced in Marceline's debut episode, Evicted, the same episode that establishes the tree fort was hers. The show took a creature from the second season and put a 1,000-year-old stone monument of it in the finale's vision of the far future, which is a way of marking how much time has passed. The living thing has become a statue. The animal has become an artifact. And almost nobody watching the finale knew that the stone duck was a callback to a duck from season 2, because the show did not tell them. It just put it there for the people who would recognize it. There is more in that future sequence. The smoke from a duck in it spells out the words "Adventure Time," which is the kind of detail that rewards a freeze frame. The figure riding the stone giant duck is unidentified, and that has been noted and discussed extensively, because the figure is wearing a backpack that resembles Simon's. The show provides no explanation. Simon, freed from the crown at the end of the main series, would be a normal mortal human, and would age and die within a conventional human lifespan. And so a figure with a Simon-like backpack 1,000 years later does not have an obvious reading. But the show does not close the door on Simon's story firmly. It leaves the backpack on the figure and lets the question hang. The same way it leaves the snail's age unexplained. The same way it left the thing Simon did while wearing the crown unspecified. The absence is doing work. You are meant to wonder. The Ice Kingdom in the future sequence, by the way, is much larger and more inhospitable than the one we know, which connects to what happens at the end of the finale with Gunther, the penguin who absorbs the crown and becomes something new, but that is its own thread, and the point here is narrower. The title sequence, the thing you watched every single time an episode started, was full of detail you were not looking at, and the finale reached back into it and into season 2 and pulled threads forward, and it did all of this without a single line of dialogue explaining any of it. There's one more thing about the original title sequence worth noting, because it is a hidden detail of a different kind, a production detail rather than a visual one. The hill Finn and Jake run over is not a generic hill. It is a real location within the world, the same hill visible in and around the grasslands in dozens of episodes. The geography of the title sequence is continuous with the geography of the show. The image you saw at the start of every episode is a place the characters actually go, and the original sequence appears intact and unaltered in the Together Again special, the Distant Lands episode, that is clearly set in a later period of Finn and Jake's lives, which makes the choice to use the original sequence unchanged its own quiet emotional note. This is still that show. These are still those characters. Even here, the title sequence carries that, and it carries it in the background, the way this show carries everything that matters. There is a small living video game console with a face, and its name is short for 2 words. And those 2 words are an instruction. And the instruction is the entire reason the console exists. And the show plants that so quietly you might not catch it until the episode tells you outright. BMO. The name is short for Be More. Not a given name, a directive. And the episode Be More, Season 5, Episode 28, which aired on June the 17th, 2013, the same episode with the nuclear bomb on the shelf, is where BMO's origin gets properly explained. And it turns out to be one of the more unexpectedly tender pieces of backstory in a show full of them. There's a man named Mosef, called Mo, an ancient inventor who has gradually replaced most of his biological body with robotic components over the centuries, keeping his human skin. He built the MO units, a whole line of them, at a factory called MO Company, located in the Badlands of U. Most MOs are fairly utilitarian. They do jobs. BMO is different. Mo built BMO specifically to understand fun, to understand play, to be more than a machine, which is where the name comes from. He built BMO to look after his son. The thing is, Mo never had a son. So he sent BMO out into the world alone, hoping it would find a family of its own, maybe find someone else's little boy to care for. That is the origin of the character who, on the surface, is a Game Boy with a face. A robot built by a lonely old man to love a child that did not exist, sent out to find one. The MO Company factory in the Badlands is a pre-war structure. It predates the Mushroom War. Mo is old enough to have survived that conflict and to have kept building robots for 1,000 years afterward, which puts him in the same category as Simon and the surviving humans. one more thread connecting the show's present to the ruins underneath it. And BMO's full designation, the long technical one the show gives, is a string of model numbers. But the character also has a name buried in there, Mo Mastro Giovanni, with a piece in the middle that is the word football spelled backwards. The show does not explain that. It is just the name. There is a joke hidden inside the name of one of the show's main characters, and the show never points at it. The same way it never points at the snail. The same way it never points at the black death dip in the chart. There is more, and it lives in a Distant Lands special, the one called BMO, which is set before the main series. The special tells the story of BMO getting launched to Mars, making friends, inadvertently averting a crisis, and crash landing near the tree fort while Finn is still a small child, which means BMO has essentially been with Finn since before Finn could properly remember. BMO is the oldest relationship in Finn's life, and the rocket that launches BMO in that special comes directly from the MO Company factory. And Mo's desk in the special has blueprints for a Mars colony on it, which is the payoff to that desk we saw in passing in Be More years earlier. Mo always had an interest in Mars. The show put the blueprints on the desk in season 5, and then, in a special that aired in 2020, told you what they were for. That is a 7-year wait between the plant and the payoff, and the plant was a prop on a desk that the camera barely lingered on. And then there is the inside of BMO. In Distant Lands, you briefly see BMO's interior, and it contains a golden heart, and next to the heart there is a medal and a diploma. This is a Wizard of Oz reference. The medal stands for the Scarecrow's brain. The diploma stands for the Tin Man's heart. The golden heart itself corresponds to the Cowardly Lion's courage. The 3 gifts the wizard hands out at the end of that story are all sitting inside BMO's chest. And consider what BMO was built for: to be more than a machine, to understand love and play. The Wizard of Oz is a story about characters who already had the things they were searching for and needed a symbol to recognize it. And the show put those symbols inside the robot who was built to be capable of feeling. And it did not say a word about it. It is in there for the freeze frame crowd, the same as the chemistry on Bubblegum's chalkboards, the same as the browser history. The eventual fate of BMO, by the way, becoming the king of Ooo in the show's far future, the one who holds the history of Finn and Jake and tells it to new adventurers 1,000 years later, feels entirely right once you know all of this. BMO is the show's oldest witness. It was there from before the series started, in a sense, and it will be there long after everyone else is gone, holding the story, the way it was built to hold things. There is one more BMO adjacent detail worth naming, because it follows the same logic on a SATA register. AMO. The first MO ever built, the oldest sibling, was designed to receive love, as a counterpart to a unit designed to give it. A MO eventually goes wrong in a significant way, and the contrast between it being built to need love in a world that had just been through a catastrophic war, in a factory that then sat abandoned for centuries, and BMO, built to give rather than receive, who found a family in Finn and Jake without anyone having to provide one, is one of those quietly rich details the show plants without fuss. AMO did not get what it was built for, and the results were bad. BMO did not need to be given a family and found one anyway. The show does not draw the moral, it is just there, in the design, in the corner where this show keeps the things that matter. There is a small, sharp-toothed Peppermint who works as Princess Bubblegum's personal assistant, and he is also, casually, consistently, across the entire series, involved in dark magic. And the show treats this as a quirk for years before it ever treats it as the truth it always was. Peppermint Butler. He carries trays. He answers doors. He stands beside Bubblegum looking servile. And every so often, in an episode that is about something else, he does something, summons something, knows something, traffics with something that in context plays as comic relief as the funny little Candyman being weirdly ominous, and you laugh and the episode moves on. The show is doing the snail thing again. It is putting a pattern in front of you in small doses, getting you used to it, until you stop reading it as ominous and start reading it as just Peppermint Butler being Peppermint Butler. And then there is Wizard City. Wizard City is one of the Distant Lands specials, and it follows Peppermint Butler going to wizard school, and it looks back at all of those scattered moments, all the dark magic, all the deals, all the things he knew that a butler should not know, and it puts a lens over them that makes them cohere. He has been this person the whole time. The episodes that played his occult dabbling for laughs were not wrong, exactly. They were just incomplete. Wizard City completes them, and the completion has been waiting since the early seasons, available the whole time to anyone who was adding it up, and ignored by the show itself, deliberately, because the joke required you to underestimate him, and the eventual reveal required the joke. This is a slightly different version of the pattern than the snail, and it is worth naming the difference. The snail was a small thing made big by a single dramatic payoff. Peppermint Butler is a small thing made big by a slow recontextualization. a special that goes back and reads the subtext as text. Both are the show planting and waiting, but the Peppermint Butler version is, in a way, more confident, because it requires the show to spend years letting you laugh at a character it knew you were misreading, trusting that the misreading would pay off later, trusting that you would not feel cheated when it did. You do not feel cheated. You feel the way you feel when you reread a book and notice that the ending was foreshadowed on page 20. The pleasure is in the rereading, in the discovery that the show was always being honest with you, just not in the order you expected. Adventure Time did that with a Candy Butler in the background for the better part of a decade, and it is the same instinct that put the bomb on the shelf and the chemistry on the chalkboard. The world was always coherent. You just had not been shown all of it yet. There is a thread here that connects Peppermint Butler to Bubblegum herself, because Bubblegum is the show's other great example of a character whose surface and depth the show keeps deliberately misaligned, though on a grander scale. The princess in the early seasons reads as the love interest, the damsel the Ice King keeps trying to marry, the nice ruler of the Candy Kingdom. And then, over seasons, the show keeps adding details in episodes about other things that complicate her, until you understand that she is over 800 years old, that she rules through means that are not always benevolent, that she created life and made mistakes she carries forever, that her relationship with Marceline goes back 1,000 years and broke apart in ways the show eventually shows you in a Distant Land special. None of that was announced. It accumulated, the way the Mushroom War accumulated, the way the snail's importance accumulated. By the time the show is openly examining Bubblegum's authoritarianism and her loneliness, you have already absorbed enough scattered evidence that the examination confirms rather than reveals. She was always this person. The show just let you think she was simpler. For the same reason, it let you think Peppermint Butler was comic relief. For the same reason, it let you think Ooh was a fantasy world and not a graveyard. The simplicity was the setup. The depth was always coming. There is a boy who believes he's the last human in the world, and he is wrong. And the show knows he is wrong from very early on, and it spends most of the series letting him believe it, dropping the evidence against it in episodes about other things, until finally, in season 8, it takes him out to sea to find the people he thought did not exist. The boy is Finn. The belief is that he is the last human in Ooo, and the slow dismantling of that belief is one of the longest running planted and paid off threads in the entire series, and it touches almost every other thread we have talked about, because it is bound up with the Mushroom War, with the ruins in the background, with the survivor details, with everything the show was building under the surface. The first crack comes in season 2, with Susan Strong. Finn meets Susan and initially believes she might be human, and the show lets that question hang. And over the course of the series it gets answered. Susan is human, or close enough, a descendant of human tribes that survived the war by hiding. That alone should have ended Finn's belief that he is the last, but the show is in no hurry, and Finn's understanding of his own situation lags behind the evidence the audience is being shown, which is itself a kind of characterization. He clings to the idea of being the last, because being the last is a story he knows how to be in. The show keeps dropping hints. There is Two-Bread Tom and his tribe. There is the gradual revelation that humanity did not vanish. It relocated, it adapted, it went underground and overseas. And then there is Finn's father. Finn meets his biological father, Martin, in the Crystal Citadel in the episodes Wake Up and Escape from the Citadel, Season 6, Episodes 1 and 2, which aired together as a 1-hour event on April the 21st, 2014. Martin is a human, which means Finn is not the last, and never was. And the man who could have told him is right there, in front of him, a criminal in a multiversal prison, and when Finn finally gets to speak to him, Martin does not even recognize his own son. This is the episode where Finn loses his arm, reaching for a father who is already leaving, and the show does not tell you how to feel about that. It strips the music out. Finn floats in the water, his arm gone, a flower growing from the wound, and Jake asks if he is okay, and Finn does not answer, and the show holds on his face and lets the absence of music do the work. The flower in that scene is the same flower we have been tracking, the one that connects to the grass sword, the one that grows back over multiple episodes. The show planted the regrowth, the sword, the father, the humanity question, all of it in separate places over seasons, and it collected them here, in a wound, in a silence. The full answer comes in the Islands miniseries, in Season 8, which aired in 2017. Finn, Jake, BMO, and Susan take a boat out of Ooo across the ocean to find where the humans went, and they find them. An entire archipelago of humans, hidden, living on a place called Founders Island, kept isolated by a system that was built to protect them and now functions to imprison them. Finn is not the last human, he never was. There are thousands of them, and they chose to disappear, to hide from the world, and Finn's whole life has been shaped by a loneliness that was, in a sense, a misunderstanding. A story he told himself because nobody had told him the true one. And the Islands miniseries is also where Finn's own origin closes. His father, Martin, was from the islands, fled on a makeshift raft with the infant Finn. The raft wrecked, and the baby washed up in a forest in Ooh, where Joshua and Margaret, Jake's parents, found him and raised him. The show took 8 seasons to answer a question it had been planting since season 2, and it answered it by sailing away from everything the show had been, out past the edge of the map, to a place the background details had been pointing at the whole time. The ruins in Ooh were always the evidence. The humans were always somewhere. The show just made you wait, and made Finn wait, until the waiting meant something. There is a detail in the Islands material that follows the show's habit perfectly, which is the thing Susan has on her head. For seasons, Susan wears what looks like a hat. It is not a hat. It is a control device, placed on her by the island system, and the show drew her with it from her first appearance in season 2, and did not tell you what it was until 6 seasons later. The hat that was not a hat. The same instinct as Finn's actual hat, the bear one, the origin of which the show also held back until it would land. The same instinct as the snail's age, as the thing Simon did, as the figure on the stone duck. The show puts the object in front of you, fully formed, and lets you assume the simple reading. And then, eventually, when it is ready, it tells you what the object actually was. And the gap between your assumption and the truth is where the show was living the whole time. There is a stuffed bear in the corner of a bedroom, and it has a button sewn on where one eye should be. And the show puts it on screen in the 2nd season and does not tell you why it matters until the 5th. And when it tells you, the bear turns out to be the most quietly devastating object in the entire series. Hambo, we touched it earlier in the Simon section, because the bear is part of the Simon story, but it is also the center of one of the show's longest threads about Marceline. And Marceline is, in a lot of ways, the character the show built most of its hidden detail around, because Marceline has been alive for the entire existence of Ooh as we know it, and a character that Old is, structurally, a character whose backstory is the show's backstory. Hambo is the bear Simon gave her in the ruins after the Mushroom War, a scruffy thing from a destroyed toy shop, and she sewed a button onto its missing eye with the last bit of thread she had, and she carried it for centuries. The show establishes the depth of that in the episode I Remember You, Season 4, Episode 25, which aired on October the 15th, 2012. The episode where the present-day Ice King, who has no memory of being Simon, asks Marceline for help writing a song, and she has all the memories he does not, and has been carrying them alone for 1,000 years. But the bear's own arc has its own episodes. In The Sky Witch, Marceline goes to retrieve Hambo from a witch named Maya, who acquired it after Marceline's ex-boyfriend Ash sold it while Marceline was asleep, which is why they broke up. To free the bear, Bubblegum trades away a shirt she's owned for years. A rock shirt, the one Marceline threw into a crowd at a concert and Bubblegum caught. Trading the shirt for the bear is one of the most emotionally resonant exchanges in the show, told largely without dialogue, and it only works because the show had spent seasons making both objects matter. The bear since season 2, the shirt since whenever you first noticed Bubblegum wearing it under her other clothes. And then, in the episode Betty, Marceline sacrifices Hambo. She gives up the bear she has carried for centuries to open a time portal, so that Simon, briefly restored to himself, can reconnect with Betty. She does it without being asked. She does not make a production of it. She just does it. And the show knows that you know what it cost her, and so it does not need to underline it. That is the show's instinct everywhere. Trust that the planted thing has weight, and do not insult the weight by announcing it. The bear was in the bedroom in season 2. By the time it is destroyed, you have watched it travel through Simon's hands, through Ash's betrayal, through Marja's shelf, through Bubblegum's trade, and the destruction lands, because the journey was real, even though most of the journey happened in episodes that were about other things. There is a great deal more hidden in and around Marceline, because she is the show's witness, the one who was there. The detail of how she feeds, established early and kept consistent. She does not drink blood, she absorbs the color red, she can suck the red out of anything red adjacent, and the act of feeding is the removal of color rather than the consumption of blood. And blood attracts her because of its color, not its substance. And if she is starved of red long enough, she goes feral, which becomes a plot point in the episode Red Starved, when she, Finn, and Jake are trapped underground. That is a genuinely original piece of vampire mythology, and the show plays it straight, never as a cute quirk, just as how she works. Her origin gets its fullest explanation in the Stakes miniseries, Season 7, Episodes 5 through 12, which aired over 4 nights in November 2015. She was not born a vampire. She was a half-demon, half-human child. Her father, Hunson Abadir, the immortal ruler of the Nightosphere. Her mother, human, which is why she aged at all during childhood. And after the war, she wandered, became a vampire hunter as a teenager, staking vampires to protect the human community still trying to rebuild. And she was bitten by the vampire king in the act of staking him, absorbing both his death and his power at once, becoming the very thing she had been hunting, and then living with that for 1,000 years. And there is a song in Stakes, sung by Marceline's mother, called Everything Stays. It is a lullaby, and the show treats it as the canonical maternal song, the thing her mother sang to her, and the lyric is about things staying right where you left them and changing anyway, which is, when you sit with it, a description of the show's entire method. Everything stays right where you left it. Everything stays, but it still changes. That is the snail. That is the bear in the bedroom. That is the bomb on the shelf, the chemistry on the chalkboard, the figure on the stone duck. The objects stay. The meaning changes. The show wrote its own thesis into a lullaby and gave the lullaby to a dying woman to sing to a child who would carry it for a millennium. And it did not stop to tell you that the lullaby was also about the show. It just let it be a lullaby. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a song that opens the series finale, and an acoustic guitar plays it, and BMO sings it, and the person who wrote it had left the show years earlier to make a different one, and she came back specifically to write this. And the song's lyric is, more or less, the entire show's argument about itself, and almost nobody watching knew the production story behind the moment they were hearing. The song is Time Adventure. The person is Rebecca Sugar, and the story of Rebecca Sugar on Adventure Time is itself one of the show's hidden details, in the sense that it is sitting in the credits the whole time, and most viewers never connected the dots. Rebecca Sugar joined Adventure Time as a storyboard artist. She wrote songs while she was there, and the songs she wrote are some of the ones people remember most. The short, improvised sounding one Marceline plays the first time we hear her sing, the song in I Remember You, Others. Her final storyboard on the show was the episode Simon and Marcy, Season 5, Episode 14, which aired on March the 25th, 2013. The flashback episode where Simon, still partly human, still wearing the crown, protects the child Marceline in the ruins of a city and sings the theme song from Cheers to keep her calm while she is ill. After Simon and Marcy, Rebecca Sugar left to create Steven Universe. So when she came back, years later, to write Time Adventure for the finale of Adventure Time, it was a return, and the song carries that. The lyric, paraphrasing, is that the people come and go, but they are always in your heart. She wrote that for a show she had left, to play over the end of a story she had helped build, and the people watching the finale heard a sweet song, and most of them did not know they were also hearing a goodbye from someone who had moved on and chosen to come back for this. The credit is in the credits. The story is not. The story is the kind of thing you find out later and then cannot unhear. There is a whole layer of this in the show's music and voice casting, and it follows the same logic, things that are true and verifiable and sitting right there, but not announced. Olivia Olson voices Marceline throughout the series, and Pendleton Ward specifically wanted her for the role because of her performance as Vanessa Doofenshmirtz in Phineas and Ferb, and she is a genuine musician, which is a large part of why the musical episodes involving Marceline carry the weight they do. The performance is real in a way that elevates the writing. And Olivia Olson's father is Martin Olson, who wrote for Adventure Time and who voices Hudson Abadir, Marceline's demon father. So Marceline and her father in the show are played by a daughter and a father in real life. The show built one of its most charged relationships out of an actual parent and child and never said a word about it on screen, the same way it never said a word about the football joke in BMO's name. It is there if you read the credits. It is not there if you do not. The end credits theme is another one. The song that plays over the credits of so many episodes, the gentle one, Come Along With Me and the Butterflies and Bees, is a song called Island Song, performed by Ashley Erickson, who is from the band Lake, and the song existed before the show, originally under a different title, Christmas Island, and the show adopted it as the credits theme, and then the series finale is named Come Along With Me, after the song that had been playing over the credits the whole time. The show put the title of its last episode in the credits of episodes for years, quietly, every time the credits rolled, and only at the very end did it pull the song's name up into the title and make the connection visible. That is a long game. Years of a credits theme being just a credits theme, and then the finale revealing that it had been pointing somewhere all along. The original title sequence theme is the same kind of thing on a smaller scale. The short snippet of a song sung in a childlike voice, which is Pendleton Ward singing it himself, deliberately off-pitch, at a specific register, 11 words long, describing Ooh as a magical place, and naming Finn as the human, as if that were a distinction, which the show would eventually confirm it was. It was a bold choice to give a show with a deep, sprawling mythology a theme barely longer than a tweet. The brevity is part of the argument. This world does not need explaining, just go there, and the show held to that. It did not explain. It planted and waited and trusted you to go there and look in the corners. There is an episode of Adventure Time that is animated in 3 dimensions, on purpose, and it looks wrong on purpose, and it was made by a visual artist who does not normally work in television, and it is one of several places where the show let an outside hand touch it, and the willingness to do that is itself a kind of hidden detail about how the show was run. The episode is A Glitch is a Glitch, which is in season 5, and it was written and directed by David O'Reilly, a 3D artist. It is the only episode with 3-dimensional animation, and the 3-dimensionality is the point. The Ice King writes a computer virus that starts erasing reality, and the episode itself starts to come apart, to glitch, to render incorrectly, and the wrongness is deliberate and authored. The show handed an episode to someone whose whole aesthetic is digital strangeness, and let him break the show's look on screen. And it did this while the show was at the peak of its popularity, which is a confident thing to do. And it is consistent with the production approach that made everything else in this video possible, because that is the thing that connects all of this finally, the snail and the chalkboard and the taped viola and the bomb on the shelf and the David O'Reilly episode. The show was run on a storyboard-driven model. Pendleton Ward, and after he stepped down as showrunner during season 5, Adam Muto, built a process where storyboard artists were handed a 2-sentence premise and asked to build the episode, to write it and draw it and find its tone, rather than executing a locked script handed down from above. That is why the show feels so personal, so strange, so different from episode to episode, and it is also why the corners are so rich. When the person drawing the background is also, in a meaningful sense, an author of the episode, the background is not filler. It is somewhere they get to put things. The snail challenge works because the animators bought into it. The real chemistry on Bubblegum's board is there because someone on that episode wanted it there. The Black Death in the population chart is there because the person who designed that chart cared. The show's structure pushed authorship down to the level of the people making the images, and the people making the images responded by filling the images with intention. And the cumulative result is a show where almost nothing is just there. There is a reason Adventure Time produced a whole generation of creators. Rebecca Sugar with Steven Universe, others. The storyboard room was a place where you learned to author, not just execute, and the corners of the show are the proof of what that produces. There is one more production detail that belongs here, at the root of everything, which is where the show came from. Adventure Time began as a 7-minute short made by Pendleton Ward for Frederator Studios, which premiered on Nicktoons in January of 2007. In that short, the boy is not named Finn. He is named Pen, after the creator. The short is rough, the world is a cruder version of Ooh, and the short went out into the world and leaked and went viral, racking up something like 3 million views by 2008, which was a substantial number then. Nickelodeon passed on it twice, and Cartoon Network only greenlit a series after Ward proved he was not a one-hit wonder, which he did with a test short, a brief piece featuring the Lumpy Space Princess, voiced by Ward himself, which never aired. So the show that hid a snail in every episode, that built a graveyard under a candy kingdom, that put the Wizard of Oz inside a robot's chest, exists because a viral video and a never-aired test short convinced a network to take a chance. And the original short still carries a Frederator credit forward into everything, into the main series, into Distant Lands, into the Fiona and Cake spin-off, 16 years of the same studio credit in the closing seconds, which is its own small piece of continuity. The lineage of the thing sitting in the credits, every week, for anyone who stays until the end, which, if you are still here, you have. There is a villain in Adventure Time who does not want power, does not have a grudge, does not have a throne he is trying to take, and what he wants instead is for all life to end. Just that, the cessation of everything. And the show builds his backstory the way it builds everything, in pieces, across seasons, in episodes about other things, until the cosmic scale of him assembles itself out of details you half noticed. The Lich. We have already talked about how he escapes the amber through the snail in Mortal Folly. But the amber, and what put him in it, and what he is, and how he connects to the Mushroom War, and how the show eventually closes his story, all of that is its own long thread, and it is one of the clearest cases of the show hiding its mythology in plain sight. The Lich is not from the Mushroom War, although the Mushroom War is one of his expressions. He goes back much further. The show's mythology, which it never lectures about, includes a concept of cosmic cycles, of comets that pass and bring forces with them. There is a comet, the Catalyst Comet, that came to Earth in prehistoric times and brought destruction with it, and the Lich is tied to that energy, created when it reached the planet, and he has cycled between dormancy and activity ever since. The Mushroom War, in this reading, was his most recent manifestation, a nuclear weapon that expressed his intent on a civilizational scale. He is, the show eventually puts it, the last surviving wish of the bomb that ended the old world, which is a phrase that does a lot of work, because it makes the Lich and the war and the ruins in the background all the same thing, viewed from different angles. The bomb, the ruins, the Lich, the Ice Kingdom, which is the frozen remains of Simon's containment of that same bomb in the farm world reading. All of it connected, and the show lets you connect it, rather than connecting it for you. The amber prison itself is a detail worth sitting with, because of where it is. The Lich was sealed in amber in his lair after a previous attempt at destruction before the show's present day by the hero Billy, who appears in the later seasons as an old, disillusioned figure in a cave. And the lair is positioned in the Ooh landscape in a way that characters can travel to, which means that for the entire first season and into the second, the show's most terrifying entity is just sitting there, contained, while Finn and Jake are going on candy-flavored adventures. The threat is not announced. It is in the background of the world. The way the highway sign is in the background, the way the snail is in the background, waiting. And the thing that releases it is the most absurd delivery mechanism imaginable. A small background creature getting possessed and headbutting the amber open. And the show plays that completely straight, because the show's whole sensibility is that the enormous and the trivial sight side by side, that an apocalypse can ride out of a tree fort backpack on the back of a waving snail, and that this is not a joke at the expense of the apocalypse. It is just how the world is shaped. The Lich's design carries the same restraint the rest of his treatment does. He is a massive skeletal figure, partly wrapped in decaying flesh, partly encased in armor, with a green flame for a head at certain points in his existence. He moves slowly. He speaks rarely. His voice, when he does speak, is given a treatment that makes it sound layered and resonant, immediately uncomfortable. And the show is careful not to overuse him, keeping his appearances sparse so that he stays genuinely threatening rather than familiar. He is the opposite of the snail in screen time, and the same as the snail in method. A small number of carefully placed appearances, each one weighted by everything around it. And then there is what the show does with him at the end, which is genuinely strange, and, I think, exactly right. The Lich is reincarnated through a wish made in a place outside time, and he is reborn as a tiny child, called Sweet Pea, who grows up with Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig as ordinary, loving parents. Sweet Pea is a gentle giant. He is kind. He has no memory of being the Lich. The show closes out the story of its most atterrating entity, not with a battle or a banishment, but with domesticity, a 1,000-year embodiment of destruction growing up, going to school, being tucked in at night. Whether that is optimistic or quietly unnerving is something you can go back and forth on, and the show does not resolve it for you. The same way it does not resolve the figure on the stone duck. The same way it does not tell you what Simon did. The Lich, the bomb's last wish, becomes a child in a loving home, and the show plants that and leaves it in the corner, where it keeps the things that are too large to say plainly. There is a final layer above even the Lich, which the finale addresses. Golb, the cosmic source of chaos, of which the Ice Crown, the Lich, and several other destructive forces in the show are all expressions. Golb is the source. The Lich is a specific output. That distinction matters to the show's internal logic, even though the show never makes it a lecture point. And Golby visits Ooh in the finale and is eventually departed when a character who had fused with him wills it. And the relationship between Golb and the Crown and the Lich is the kind of thing the show hands you in glimpses and trusts you to assemble. The crown that took Simon is a piece of Golb. The Lich is a piece of Golb. The chaos that ended the old world is a piece of Golb. The show was building a cosmology under the Candy Kingdom the whole time, in lines you half heard, in episodes you watched for the jokes. And when it finally drew the full shape, in the finale, the shape confirmed what the corners had been implying for years. There is a woman coughing up blood in a Distant Land special, and she is trying to find a fallout shelter. And the show does not tell you she is dying of radiation poisoning. It just puts her on screen, coughing, and lets you understand what you are looking at. And that is the show's relationship with the darkest parts of its own world, distilled into one image. The woman is Elise, Marceline's mother. The special is Obsidian. And the scene is one of the hardest things in the show to watch if you know what it is, which is the condition of so much of what Adventure Time hides. It is not hard to watch because the show makes it hard. It is hard because the show trusts you to see it without help. Obsidian is one of the 4 Distant Land specials, and on the surface it is about Marceline and Bubblegum, about how they got together and how they fell apart before the series started, about Bubblegum consumed by the responsibilities of running the Candy Kingdom and pulling away, about the rock shirt caught at a concert, about a long, painful growing apart, and 1,000 years of separate lives before they find their way back to each other. The kiss between them at the end of the main series, in Come Along With Me, was animated in a way that did not draw attention to itself, and the official confirmation of the relationship came in Obsidian, with a song called Woke Up, performed by Olivia Olson, the voice of Marceline. So the special is, In part, the payoff to a relationship the show had been building quietly since the early seasons, since I Remember You's song, since the Sky Witch's wordless trade, since every scene that played their history as subtext. The show planted bubbling, as the fans call it, for the better part of a decade, in glances and gifts and songs, and then paid it off in a special, the same structure as Peppermint Butler, the same structure as everything. But inside Obsidian, in a flashback, there is Elise. She and the young Marceline are trying to find a fallout shelter, a place called the Clubhouse, and they find it, but the door is already open, and inside are skeletal remains, the people who tried to shelter there having not survived. And Elise is coughing blood. She is almost certainly dying from radiation poisoning in the aftermath of the Mushroom War, the same war that gave us the ruins in the background of Season 1, the same war the Black Death chart sits inside the timeline of, the same war Simon survived because of the crown and Mo survived by becoming a machine. The show does not spell out that Elise is dying of radiation. It does not say the word. It just shows you a woman coughing blood and an open shelter full of bones and lets you do the rest. And what you do is understand that this children's cartoon has just shown you, plainly and without comment, what happened to the people who tried to hide underground when the bombs fell. That is Adventure Time. It tucks genuinely dark material into the texture of the world, never making it the point of an episode, just letting it sit there as the truth of the setting. The way it tucks the bomb on the shelf and the snail in the corner and the lich in the amber. The horror is not foregrounded. It is in the corner. And the corner in this show is where the truth lives. There are survivor details everywhere once you are looking. And Obsidian's Elise is one of a set. Simon survived because of the crown. Mo survived by gradually replacing his failing body with robotic parts, keeping his human skin, which implies a stretch of time when biological survival required adaptation. Two bred, Tom led a human tribe that survived in isolation. Susan Strong is a descendant of hidden human tribes, slightly mutated, fundamentally human. The Founders Island humans, thousands of them, survived by sailing away and shutting themselves off. Elise and her half-demon daughter survived too, at least for a while, until the radiation took Elise. The world that grew up from all this is the world of the show. 1,000 years of strange biology and magic and mutation, and kingdoms made of candy and lumpy space. And underneath all of it, if you look at the backgrounds long enough, the outline of what used to be there, and the people scattered who made it through, each one a thread the show planted and let you find. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a category of hidden detail in Adventure Time that I want to gather here at the end before we close. Because it does not belong to any one character or thread, it is just the show's habit, operating at small scale, everywhere, all the time. And naming a handful of these is the best way to feel the texture of the thing. The Ice King's penguins are all named Gunter, every one, which is a running joke until the finale, when one specific Gunter, the one who absorbs the crown, transforms and becomes the Ice Thing, a new version of the crowned creature, and the running joke turns out to have been pointing at a successor the whole time. The lemon grabs, the lemon people Bubblegum created and then could not manage, are, like Goliad before them, her children in a sense, her experiments, her mistakes, and the show plants the pattern of Bubblegum making life and failing it long before it asks you to sit with what that means about her. There is a moment in the episode Puhoi where Finn lives an entire life inside a world made of pillows, marries, has children, grows old, and then wakes up after a few minutes. And the show never confirms whether part of him stayed there, and that ambiguity is left in the corner, unresolved, the way the show leaves things. There is the Hall of Egress, where Finn goes blind in a cave and has to learn to leave by feel. And there are visual clues hidden in the episode for the people who rewind. And yes, the snail is one of them. Placed as part of the puzzle, the show using its own oldest Easter egg as a story element. There is King Worm, where Finn is trapped in a dream and has to realize he is dreaming. And the signs that something is wrong include the snail appearing where it should not, doing what it should not, the Easter egg as a tell. There is the episode The Comet, the season 6 finale, where a hamburger pillow that has lived in the corner of the tree fort since the early seasons gets a strange spotlight in a dream sequence. A background prop briefly given a moment, the show winking at its own corners. None of these are load-bearing on their own. All of them together are the show's nervous system. They are the proof that the people who made Adventure Time treated every frame as a place where intention could live, that the storyboard model pushed authorship down to the level of the image, that the corners were never filler. And they are why the show rewards the kind of attention that this video is, in a sense, an exercise in. Not because the show is showing off, but because the show was built by people who could not help themselves, who put real chemistry on the chalkboard, and the Black Death in the chart, and the Wizard of Oz in the robot, and the snail on the ceiling, And who did all of it without ever stopping the story to make sure you saw? The seeing was always going to be yours to do. The show just made sure there was always something there to find. There is a thing the show does after it ends, which is keep paying off the things it planted, in specials and a spin-off that arrive years later. And the fact that the planted material survives the gap, that it is still there to be paid off, is its own kind of evidence about how carefully it was buried in the first place. The 4 Distant Lands specials aired on HBO Max in 2020 and 2021, 2 years and more after the main series finale, and each one is, in part, a payoff to a thread the original show left in the corner. BMO is the payoff to the question of where BMO came from and how it got to the tree fort, and it reaches back into B More, into the MO company factory, into Mo's desk and the Mars blueprints we saw in passing in Season 5. Obsidian is the payoff to the Bubbline relationship the show had been seeding since the early seasons, and it reaches back into the rock shirt, into I Remember You song, into every glance the show let you read as subtext. And it also, almost in passing, gives you Ali's coughing blood in a failed fallout shelter, the darkest single image of the Mushroom War the show ever produced, dropped into a special about a love story, because that is where the timeline put it. Together Again is the payoff to the bond between Finn and Jake, set in a later period of their lives, and it uses the original title sequence, unaltered. The same hill, the same childlike voice, singing the same 11 words, which is the show telling you, without a line of dialogue, that this is still that show. And Wizard City is the payoff to Peppermint Butler's dark magic, the running gag finally read as the truth it always was. Then there is the spin-off, Adventure Time Fiona and Cake, which aired in 2023, and which is the longest game payoff of all, because Fiona and Cake started way back in Season 3 as the Ice King's fanfiction, gender-swapped versions of everyone he knew, Finn becoming Fiona, Jake becoming Cake, Prince Gumball replacing Princess Bubblegum, read aloud to a captive audience of penguins, a joke about loneliness and the particular weirdness of a man who does not understand social boundaries, writing stories about people he knows. The Fiona and Cake episodes became fan favorites, and the show returned to them a few times across its run. And then the spin-off, more than a decade later, took the fanfiction and used multiverse logic to make it real in a specific sense. An actual alternate dimension where Fiona and Cake live. And Simon, now freed from the crown, connected to it because the crown's influence on his mind over 1,000 years had been tapping into something. The show planted a joke in Season 3 and paid it off with an entire spin-off series in 2023. And the spin-off is dense with callbacks of its own. Simon watching Cheers in the alternate world, the same sitcom he sang to young Marceline, the cultural debris following him across dimensions. And the show kept doing the move, planting and waiting and paying off, even after the credits had rolled on the original, because the move was never a gimmick. It was just how the people who made this thing thought, and they could not stop doing it. And the corners of the spin-off are as full as the corners of the show. The Frederator credit, by the way, is in the spin-off too. 16 years on from the 7-minute short, the lineage still sitting in the closing seconds, still there for anyone who stays. There is a sitcom from 1982 hidden inside the timeline of a nuclear apocalypse, and the way it got there is one of the most elegant pieces of buried information in the entire show. And it is the kind of thing that, once you see it, reorganizes how you think about when all of this happened. The sitcom is Cheers. The episode is Simon and Marcy, Season 5, Episode 14, which aired on March the 25th, 2013. In it, Simon, still partly human, still wearing the crown that is slowly erasing him, is protecting the child Marceline in the ruins of a city after the Mushroom War, and she is ill. And to keep her calm, he sings to her, and what he sings is the theme song from Cheers. He does it partly because holding on to something from before the war keeps a fragment of his mind intact, and partly because it is simply what he has, the cultural debris in his head, the thing he can offer. Cheers premiered in 1982, which means the show is using the song, casually, the way of placing the Mushroom War in or around that decade, the Cold War era, which gives the entire nuclear apocalypse backstory a very specific historical flavor. The war is not in some abstract distant past. It is roughly 1,000 years after the 1980s, which means the show's present is roughly the year 3000, give or take, and Ooo is the world that the 1980s produced after the bombs fell. That is an enormous amount of information delivered through a man singing a TV theme to a sick child. And the show does not stop to spell out the timeline implication. It just has Simon sing Cheers and trusts that the people who recognize the song will do the math, and the people who do not will still feel the tenderness of a man clinging to a fragment of a vanished world. Both readings work. The hidden one is for the people who look. The show does not punish you for not looking. It just rewards you if you do. This episode is also, separately, one of the densest concentrations of the show's hidden detail instinct in a single half hour, and it is worth lingering on because it is Rebecca Sugar's final storyboard before she left for Steven Universe, and it shows. The whole episode is the answer to questions the show planted seasons earlier without you knowing they were questions. Why is there a photograph of a young Marceline and a man in a suit on her bedroom wall since season 2? Because the man is Simon, before the crown, and they were a family of sorts in the ruins. Why does Marceline have a stuffed bear with a button eye? Because Simon found it for her in a destroyed toy shop and she sewed the button on with the last of her thread. Why, in the episode I Remember You, is Marceline so visibly destroyed by the present-day Ice King asking her for help when he is just an annoying old man to everyone else? Because she has all the memories he does not? Because the annoying old man is the wreckage of the person who kept her alive? Because she has been carrying that alone for 1,000 years? Simon and Marcy is the episode where the show stops hinting and shows you the thing the hints were about. And it is devastating precisely because the hints were so patient, because you had been walking past that photograph for 3 seasons, because the bear had been in the corner of the bedroom the whole time. The show planted and waited, and then in one episode, in Rebecca Sugar's last one, it paid all of it off at once, and the payoff was a man singing a sitcom theme to a child while he forgot her name. There is a newspaper clipping in I Remember You, by the way, the kind of background detail this show is built out of. A headline reading, something to the effect that Simon Petrikov has unearthed ancient treasure, with Simon photographed looking young and normal. The academic who found the crown on an expedition. There are versions of this clipping in other episodes, with the location of the expedition varying. The point of the clipping is the same point as everything. It is information, sitting in the background, available, never narrated. Simon was a serious scholar who found an extraordinary thing and paid an extraordinary price, and the show would rather you discover that through a clipping you freeze the frame on than have a character recite it. The clipping is the snail. The clipping is the chemistry on the chalkboard. The show keeps doing the same move, in different rooms, with different objects, for 10 seasons. And the move is always, here is the truth, in the corner, find it when you are ready. There is a vault under the Candy Kingdom, and the things in it are Princess Bubblegum's old creations, the ones that did not work. And the show plans the existence of that vault, and the pattern it represents, long before it asks you to look inside it. And when you do look inside it, you understand something about Bubblegum that none of her speeches ever say. The pattern is this. Bubblegum makes life. She made the candy people. She made Goliad, in the episode of that name, a creature meant to succeed her as ruler. And Goliad came out wrong, dangerous. And Bubblegum had to make another creature to contain it. And the show treats that as one of the formative wounds of her long life. She made the lemon grabs and could not manage them. And the lemon grabs are their own running tragedy. Lemon people built and then more or less abandoned, grieving and grotesque. And the show keeps them around as a reminder that creating life is not the same as caring for it well. And the Stakes miniseries, Season 7, Episodes 5 through 12, which aired over 4 nights in November 2015, has a vault sequence that goes through Bubblegum's history with Marceline and with her own past. And it is dense with detail the show had been planting for years. The rock shirt, the long friendship, the older versions of both of them. The vault under the Candy Kingdom is, in a sense, Bubblegum's conscience made architectural, the place where the failed experiments go. And the show built it the way it builds everything, by planting the failures one at a time in episodes about other things, until the vault, when you finally see it, is not a reveal but a confirmation. She was always this person. The corners told you. And Marceline, in Stakes, gets her fullest origin, the one we touched earlier, the half-demon child who aged because her mother was human, who wandered after the war, who became a vampire hunter as a teenager, staking vampires to protect the human community still rebuilding, who was bitten by the vampire king in the act of staking him, and he absorbed both his death and his power, and became the thing she had been hunting. And the show retroactively gives all those early episodes where she is introduced as vaguely threatening a bit of extra texture, because she's not threatening because she is malevolent, she is threatening because she's been alive for 1,000 years and has been through enough that other people's dramas tend to register as small to her, which would read as coldness if the show did not also make her deeply, specifically sentimental about particular things. The bear, Simon, Bubblegum. The show built a character who is hard and tender at the same time and never asks you to pick one. And it built her the way it built the Mushroom War and the snail's importance, in pieces, over seasons, in the corners, so that by the time Stakes lays it all out, the laying out confirms what you had been half assembling for years. That is the show's whole method, applied to its oldest character. Plant the pieces, let them sit, pay them off when the payoff will mean something, and never, at any point, stop to make sure you notice the pieces were there. There is a way the snail outgrew the show, which is worth naming before we close. because it is the clearest sign of how seriously the people around this thing took its hidden details. The snail turns up in the Adventure Time comics. It turns up in the LEGO Dimensions game, rendered as a tiny brick creature. By the time the franchise expanded into other media, the snail's status as a recurring secret had become fully official, canonized, the in-joke graduating into lore, and there is a detailed episode-by-episode breakdown of its appearances compiled by fans who clearly had strong feelings about this small mollusk. The Adventure Time Encyclopedia, the in-universe reference book, lists it, through Marceline, as a resident of the Grasslands, which is the show treating its own Easter egg as a citizen of the world. What started as a throw-a challenge between an animation crew became, over years, a thing the wider franchise built around. And that arc, from in-joke to canon, is the same arc as the snail's role inside the show itself, from background gag to the mechanism of the Lich's escape. The snail was never just a snail. The corner was never just a corner. The franchise figured that out the same way the audience did, slowly, by paying attention, and then it could not let the snail go either. There is one more category I want to gather, briefly, which is the show's experiments and crossovers, because they are hidden details about the show's own confidence rather than about its world. There is Food Chain, the Masaki Yuasa episode, animated in a style that is recognizably anime and recognizably not Adventure Time. And the show let an outside director rebuild its look for a half hour. There is A Glitch is a Glitch, the David O'Reilly episode, the only one in 3 dimensions, the one that is supposed to look broken. There is the Card Wars material, a fictional game inside the show that became a real game outside it, the kind of world detail that escaped into reality. There is the way the show would, every so often, hand an episode to a guest, or let a storyboard artist push their own sensibility hard, and the result is that the series has texture variation built into it, episodes that look and feel distinct because distinct people made them distinct. And that is only possible because the production model trusted the people making the images. The snail challenge, the real chemistry on the chalkboard, the Black Death in the chart, the experimental episodes, they are all the same thing, seen from different angles, which is a show that was run in a way that let care accumulate in the corners. And the corners are where this video has been living, because the corners are where Adventure Time put the things it could not bear to leave out and would not stop to point at. There is a question I want to put to you near the end of this, which is what it does to a show, structurally, to be built this way. And the answer is that it makes the show rewatchable in a way very few things are, because the show is, in effect, 2 shows occupying the same frames. There is the show you watch the first time, which is a goofy, warm, often genuinely funny cartoon about a boy and his magic dog in a colorful fantasy world. And there is the show you watch the second time, or the 5th, or the time you come back to it as an adult after years away, which is a melancholy, intricate, deeply sad story about a post-apocalyptic Earth, about a man erased by an artifact, about a vampire carrying 1,000 years of grief, about a princess who made life and failed it, about an evil that is the last wish of a bomb, about loneliness and time and the things you leave behind. And the remarkable thing, the thing this whole video has been circling, is that the second show was always there. The show did not change. It did not retcon. It planted the second show, frame by frame, prop by prop, clipping by clipping, in the corners of the first show from very early on. And it trusted that you would find it on your own schedule. And it never once stopped to make sure you had. That trust is rare. Most shows, when they want you to know something matters, tell you it matters. They cue the music, they hold the shot, they have a character say the line. Adventure Time does some of that in its big moments, but underneath the big moments, there is this enormous substrate of detail that the show never cues at all, that it just leaves there. The bomb on the shelf, the taped viola, the snail in every episode, the Black Death in the chart, the Wizard of Oz in BMO's chest, the football joke in BMO's name, the Cheers theme dating the war, the photograph in the bedroom, the figure with Simon's backpack on the stone duck in the future, the hat that was not a hat on Susan's head, the real chemistry on the chalkboard, the inventor's blueprints, the Frederator credit 16 years running, none of it cued, all of it intentional. And the cumulative effect of all of it, the thing it adds up to, is a show that feels alive in a way that animated television almost never feels alive. Because every corner of it was made by someone who cared about the corner. And the show's structure, the storyboard-driven model, gave those people the room to put their care where the camera was not looking. There is a book in Adventure Time, an old one, that Finn carries in the early seasons, and the show calls it the Enchiridion. And like so many objects in this show, it starts as a prop and turns out to have history, ties to the Mushroom War era, ties to the show's larger mythology, and the show treats it the way it treats the golden sword and Finn's hat, letting it be a simple thing for a long time, and then revealing when the revelation will land that it was never simple. There is Jake's piano music, the gentle stuff he plays, which the show uses to characterize him as something other than a stretchy comic engine, a creature with an inner life, the same way it uses BMO, playing alone in empty rooms, to characterize a robot built to understand play. There is Lady Rainicorn, who speaks Korean throughout the series, never subtitled, voiced by the show's storyboard supervisor's mother. And the show simply lets a major character speak an unsubtitled language for 10 seasons, trusting context to carry it, which is its own kind of confidence in the audience. There is Holly Jolly Secrets again, worth one more pass, because the structural trick it pulls, burying the saddest scene in the series inside a goofy Christmas episode with candy canes and a Santa hat, is the show's whole method in one episode, the tonal corner, the thing you do not see coming because you are laughing. And the show does that on purpose. The comedy is the camouflage, and underneath it is the man on the VHS tape watching himself disappear. The show uses comedy the way it uses backgrounds, as a place to hide things, and the things it hides there are not jokes, they are the truth, waiting. And there is the Christmas episode instinct generalized, because Adventure Time did this more than once, dropped something genuinely heavy into an episode whose surface was light, trusted the contrast to make it land, and never warned you. The show would give you an episode that was, on its face, a silly adventure, and tuck into it a detail that recontextualized a season. The way Be More tucked the bomb onto the shelf, the way I Remember You tucked the newspaper clipping into the background, the way High Strangeness tucked the Black Death into the chart. The lightness was never a limitation. It was a design choice. The same one as the sleep content principle this very video runs on, which is that something can be comfortable to drift through and also be carrying more than it looks like it is carrying. Adventure Time understood that better than almost any show aimed at children, or at anyone, and it understood it from very early, and it built 10 seasons on it. And the corners are full because the people who made it could not help themselves. And the truth is in the corners, because that is where this show always put the truth. So when people say Adventure Time is the kind of show you can watch 100 times and keep finding something new, this is the literal mechanism of that. It is not a vague compliment. It is a description of how the thing was built. The animators and writers and background artists hid things, actual things, on purpose. And a lot of those things were not fan service, they were story. And the snail waving in the background is not just a fun hidden object game. It eventually becomes the way the show's most terrifying villain escapes his prison. And that is the kind of show this is. All the way down, in every frame, in every corner, for 10 seasons and 4 specials and a spin-off, hiding the truth in plain sight and waiting for you to be ready. The pattern, if you want it in one sentence, is the lullaby. Everything stays right where you left it. Everything stays, but it still changes. The snail stays in the corner. What the corner means changes. The bear stays in the bedroom. What the bear costs changes. The ruins stay in the background. What the ruins are changes the moment you are ready to see them. The show wrote that into a song and gave the song to a dying woman. And it is also, accidentally and exactly, the show describing itself. And the show did not stop to point that out either, because the show never stopped to point anything out. It just planted and waited and trusted. And the trust is the whole reason it still feels like home when you come back to it. The snail still waving, the hill still there, the tree fort still standing in a frame you watched 1,000 times and are only now beginning to see all the way into. And maybe that is the real thing to take from a night like this one, if you are taking anything. Not the list of details, though the details are good, and not the trivia, though the trivia is fun to have. The thing is the disposition behind it. Somebody, on this show, decided that the chalkboard should have real chemistry on it, even though nobody would read it. Somebody decided the population chart should include the Black Death, even though it flashes by in a second. Somebody hid a snail in nearly 300 episodes and found a new place for it every time. Somebody put the Wizard of Oz inside a robot's chest, and the name of the last episode in the credits of the first one, and a sitcom from 1982 into the timeline of a nuclear war. And none of those people stopped the story to tell you they had done it. They just did it, because doing it was the work, and the work mattered to them. And the show is the accumulation of all that mattering, layered into the corners, waiting. You do not have to find any of it for the show to be good. The show is good on the surface, the way it was good when you were a kid, the goofy, warm thing about a boy and his dog. But it is also, underneath, in the corners, the record of a lot of people caring about something more than they had to. And that is a rare thing to be able to point at. And it is why the show keeps rewarding the kind of attention that this video is, in the end, just an extended act of. If you stayed for all of this, thank you for staying. If you fell asleep somewhere in the Marceline section, that is genuinely fine. There was nothing waiting at the end that you missed except this, which is just a quiet observation that the people who made this show loved it enough to fill the parts of it nobody was going to look at. And that is a kind of love that does not announce itself, that you only find by looking, the way you only ever found the snail by looking. It is still there. It was always there. And if you want to go back to Ooh tomorrow night and look again, the show will be exactly where you left it, changed only by what you now know to find in the corners. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.